Nova then came the silence. The kind that doesn't scream, it calculates. No rage. No headlines. Just shadows moving in the dark. They thought they destroyed him. They thought he would vanish. But what they buried came back sharper. Colder. And now, he's the storm they never saw coming. I figured it was just another one of those standard check-ins. Just one more line item in the endless list of responsibilities I'd taken on during my 7 relentless years at Orion Dynamics. 7 years of grinding through deadlines under the buzz of flickering fluorescent lights, with half-eaten takeout cluttering my desk. 7 years of missed milestones, rain-soaked drives, and sacrifices so heavy I barely noticed the friendships they buried. I believed it all had a purpose, that the late nights, the loyalty, the personal cost, it was all building towards something real. A corner office, a promotion that meant something. Maybe even a simple thank you from the man who ran the show, Victor Harlan. Victor, my father-in-law. The man who ruled that corporate empire like a king perched on his throne. His expression that morning? As cold and unreadable as ever. Carved from stone, his hands folded neatly on the table in front of him, the company's crest gleaming on his tablet. He didn't even bother to put emotion behind his voice. Just dropped the words like a blade. We're letting you go. Performance issues. That's what he said. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood. The floor beneath me felt like it was shifting. I waited, expecting some kind of explanation, maybe even a sugar-coated excuse. But Victor didn't blink. His face remained blank, daring me to fight back. Performance issues. As if 7 years of my life hadn't just disappeared from their memory the moment I became expendable. Then came the HR manager, a woman who once toasted my work ethic over cheap wine at company retreats. She slid a folder toward me without meeting my eyes. Severance terms. A gag order. A list of restrictions about what I could no longer say, do, or even be. For a split second, I opened my mouth to protest. But the words never made it past my throat. What would be the point? I walked out through the pristine glass lobby, a cardboard box in my arms, and a stiff, empty smile frozen on my face. I exchanged a few awkward handshakes and hollow well wishes with people too ashamed or indifferent to look me in the eye. Outside, the winter air hit like a slap. The sun was high but gave no warmth, just a harsh white glare. I stood there for a moment, my breath rising in pale clouds, trying to make sense of how quickly everything had collapsed. Like I was never more than a name on a payroll sheet. Still stunned, I got into my car and drove home. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so tight they went numb. The thought crept in like a whisper. What if she already knew? No, Sabrina wouldn't. She couldn't. I kept telling myself Sabrina would understand. My wife. My person. She would be angry for me. She'd tell me I was worth more than Victor's cold dismissal. That we'd get through this together. I even practiced what I'd say on the drive back, repeating the words over and over like a prayer. But I should have known. The second I pulled into the driveway, I felt it. Something was off. The house looked wrong. Too still. No porch light on. No hint of warmth coming from inside. I opened the front door, and there she was, Sabrina, standing like she'd rehearsed it, like an actress waiting for her final scene. Her luggage already packed, stacked neatly by the door. She didn't speak at first. Just pressed a thick envelope into my chest like it was a delivery, not a goodbye. Her eyes were blank, her movements sharp and practiced. My hands shook as I tore it open. Divorce papers, and a separate letter nullifying the prenup. Clauses she had revised quietly, long before today. But the final twist? A glossy brochure. A homeless shelter. I don't need you anymore, she said, cold and flat, like she was reading off a script. You're useless now. That word, useless, slammed through me like a gunshot. I stared at her, this woman I had stood by, sacrificed for, believed in. And all I saw was ice. She had never loved me. I had just been a stepping stone. A temporary ladder she kicked away once she reached the top. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My legs nearly buckled, and I had to look away or I might have collapsed right there. I didn't shout, didn't argue. Some stubborn shred of pride inside me refused to give her the satisfaction. So I turned, walked back out the door, and didn't look back. I left with nothing but a beat-up duffel bag, a few wrinkled shirts tossed inside, and a heart that cracked quietly beneath the weight of it all. There was no reason to glance back. That house wasn't home anymore, just an empty shell that echoed with silence. The sky darkened as I crossed the front yard. My breath came in sharp bursts, fogging in the freezing air. I slid into the driver's seat, gripped the steering wheel, and stared into the night. I could almost hear their laughter. Victor, smug and smugger. Sabrina, cold and victorious. They thought they had broken me, that they had stripped everything away. They were wrong. I turned the key. The engine growled to life. My hands had stopped shaking. My mind, once clouded with disbelief, had sharpened into something colder, clearer. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I made a quiet promise under the stars. They were going to regret thinking I was disposable. And when that day came, it would be too damn late. That night marked the start, not of survival, of calculation. That first night, I slept in my car. The seat was stiff, the cold crept into my bones, and the windows fogged with each shaky breath. I parked at the far end of a rundown strip mall, where the streetlights barely reached the cracked pavement. I tugged my old coat tighter and tried to find a sliver of warmth. Sleep came in short bursts, broken by every creak, every gust of wind, every distant sound that made my heart jump. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything unraveled so fast. How years of building a life could be undone by a few cold signatures. The second night, I knew I had to adapt. Pride is heavy, but the need to survive weighs even more. I used a fake name to check into a crumbling motel at the edge of town. Paid in cash. Kept my head low. That was day 2. Just 48 hours into the fall, and I was already learning how to vanish. The front desk clerk didn't even blink. Just slid me a key card and looked past me like I didn't exist. The room stank of bleach and stale smoke, the kind of place where no one asked questions and nobody cared who you were. The mattress sagged, the air conditioner wheezed like it was gasping for breath, but I lay back and let myself relax for the first time in 2 days. And even then, even in that dump, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't done. Not even close. As I stared at the stained ceiling tiles, something cold and electric lit up inside me. They thought they had gutted me, that I was just an empty shell now. But what they never saw, what they never even thought to look for, was that those years I spent at Orion weren't just sacrifice. They were strategy. That so-called mediocre performance they used as an excuse? It was part of a bigger game they never even saw coming. While they were busy patting themselves on the back and looking down on me, I had been using every spare moment to build something far more powerful, tucked away inside shell companies and anonymous entities, all hidden in plain sight. They had no clue I was the one behind the very firm that had guided Helix to its biggest wins, every major merger, every high-stakes acquisition, every leap forward. All of it subtly nudged along by a company they didn't even realize I controlled. I built that firm quietly, behind layers of proxies and cutouts so clean and insulated that not even a whisper of it ever reached Victor's ears. He liked to think of himself as the master planner, the grand strategist. He had no idea he was just a figurehead, a puppet whose strings I'd been tugging from the shadows all along. And now that they discarded me like I was nothing, like I was too small to matter, they had unknowingly cleared the board and given me full permission to play without rules. That night, the third since everything fell apart, tucked away in that dingy motel room, I started laying the groundwork. I jammed a rickety chair under the door handle, a leftover habit from days when safety wasn't guaranteed, and fired up a battered old laptop I had rescued from my trunk. My fingers flew over the keys, muscle memory kicking in stronger than the exhaustion that weighed on me. First order of business? Lock down my real accounts, the ones buried deep beneath layers of offshore trusts, silent shell companies, and untraceable firms. Then I began rerouting everything. I liquidated. I isolated. I drained every cent that had even the slightest link to Helix Corp or Victor's Web. They thought they were cutting loose a deadweight. In reality, they were throwing gasoline on a sleeping fire. By the third night, I wasn't even sleeping anymore. I didn't need to. Something inside me had shifted. That familiar, dull numbness was gone, replaced by a sharp, cold energy that made me feel more awake than I had in years. I wasn't wearing the mask anymore. I wasn't shackled by caution or loyalty. Every move I made now was calculated. Silent. A ghost slipping through the fortress they thought was untouchable. I started reaching out to old allies, people who still owed me favors, debts long unsettled. We talked through encrypted messages, whispers in the digital dark, burner phones and dead-drop calls in the middle of the night. Bit by bit, I brought my network back online. Accounts Victor relied on without even knowing it. I locked them down, froze them like ice. Cash flow, gone. Overseas liquidity, vanished. The assets they thought were eternal were nothing more than illusions, and I started pulling at those threads, slowly and precisely, so that when their empire unraveled, It wouldn't explode. It would silently decay. They thought they'd ousted a pawn. They had no clue they were removing the king. And I watched it all begin to fracture. At first, it was subtle. A shipment delay. A failed wire transfer. Small cracks that would go unnoticed to anyone else. But I knew exactly what they meant. Seeds of doubt planted in the minds of investors and partners. Victor, always so arrogant, wouldn't even recognize the signs. And Sabrina? She'd be too busy perfecting her next post or planning her next public appearance to feel the earth shifting beneath her feet. In that grim little motel room, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and the low hum of broken HVAC, I didn't sink into despair. I rose. The world had stripped away everything. My house, my title, my wife, even my name. But I didn't fade. I didn't vanish. Ghosts don't disappear. They linger. And when the time came, when the walls began to crack and crumble, they would feel me there. Like a chill on the back of the neck. A breath at the base of the spine. Wondering where they went wrong when it all started falling apart. They would never think to look behind them. Never suspect that I was already there. Sitting calmly in the shadows. Watching the whole thing unfold with a clear head and a colder heart. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning. I didn't make a scene. No breakdown. No tearful messages. No late-night rants on social media Sabrina could use to justify her betrayal. I didn't give them that satisfaction. I just disappeared. Clean. Quiet. Like I had never existed. No calls, no emails, nothing. I erased myself from their world and became what they never expected. Invisible and uncontrollable. While they celebrated their so-called win, I got to work in silence. Every second they wasted feeling smug was another second I used to tighten the noose. I knew Victor better than he knew himself. I knew the weak points he tried to hide. The shady corners he called just business, the deals he buried in gray areas, and the partners he coddled when he got desperate. And now, with me out of the picture, the guy who used to patch those cracks without fanfare, those gaps were going to split wide open. I reached out to people he'd forgotten, the ones he dismissed as nobodies. Small-time vendors, junior partners, background players. But I remembered them. I had respected them, helped them when no one else would. And they hadn't forgotten me. When I called, they picked up. When I asked for help, they said yes, not out of fear, not for a paycheck, but because they remembered who got the deals done, who stayed up all night solving the problems they didn't even know existed. With a few lines of code and a few whispered conversations, I began cutting off their lifelines. Offshore funds Victor used for leverage began to freeze, one by one. At first, it looked like coincidence, a missed payment, a glitch in the supply chain. But to me, it was the opening move of a game I'd been waiting years to play. And I wasn't close to finished. I had laid traps. Years in the making. Ownership buried in technical filings. Licensing rights funneled through layers of third parties. Intellectual property registered under ghost firms in countries Helix Corp never bothered to watch. All of it mine. Every bit of it. Legal and real. Just hidden beneath a perfect disguise. Victor thought it was his. That was the joke. He posed for magazines. He smiled for cameras. He held trophies built on my foundation. And now, with one flick of the wrist, I started pulling it all back. I shut down their access to critical systems. Software that ran their logistics, gone. Market insights they depended on, pulled without warning. Contracts they thought were set in stone, suddenly gone. And lawsuits? Quiet ones. Building in the background. Clauses they didn't read. Delays they couldn't fix. Soon, the sound of them hitting would be deafening. From a cheap rental 2 cities away. A place where the neighbors never made eye contact and no one remembered your name. I watched it all unfold. I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. I had already built the machine. All I had to do was let it run. They thought they got rid of a pawn. But I had been the king all along. And now, without pretense holding me back, I could finally move the way I was always meant to, without needing Victor's nod or Sabrina's smile. Without compromise. Without caution. I had built something they never saw coming. It was quiet. It was patient. It was lethal. And best of all, it was mine. The so-called underperformance they pinned on me, that was just a move in a much longer strategy, one they never saw coming. While they were busy clapping themselves on the back for being above me, I was quietly building something far more powerful. Something real. Hidden beneath layers of shell companies and nameless entities they never thought to trace. They had no idea that I owned the very consulting firm behind Helix's biggest triumphs. Every acquisition, every merger that padded their pockets, all carefully guided by hands they assumed were theirs. That firm? I built it in silence, layer by layer, through proxies and decoys that kept my involvement buried deep. Victor loved thinking he was the mastermind behind everything. Truth is, he was nothing more than a puppet, dancing to a tune I'd been composing for years. And now that they'd tossed me aside, assuming I was harmless, irrelevant, they had unknowingly handed me the perfect opportunity. In that dim, rundown motel room, I started laying out my next move. I wedged the shaky desk chair beneath the doorknob, an old trick from the days when safety wasn't a given, and powered up a scratched-up laptop I pulled from my trunk. My fingers flew over the keys, like muscle memory had taken the wheel, pushing past the exhaustion weighing me down. First order of business, secure my real accounts. The ones hidden deep under layers of offshore trusts, fake companies, and numbered corporations no one could trace. Then I started redirecting the money, sliding it into liquid, silent assets that couldn't be touched. Anything remotely tied to Helix Corp or Victor's Circle got quarantined, bled dry, and shut down without a trace. They thought they'd broken a weak man. What they actually did was pour gasoline on a live wire. By night 3, sleep wasn't even on my radar. I didn't need rest. What I needed was already alive inside me, a burning, electric clarity that came from finally dropping the chains I had worn for way too long. Every move I made was razor-sharp, intentional, like a ghost passing unnoticed through the halls of the empire they believed no one could touch. I started reaching out not to new faces, but to old contacts, people who still owed me, favors I'd never cashed in. I messaged quietly, encrypted and low profile. Midnight burner phone calls, whispered plans. One by one, I brought networks back online that they didn't even know existed. I began shutting down offshore accounts Victor relied on, and he didn't even know he was leaning on them. I started freezing the money. Helix Corp's liquidity, the reserves they thought were permanent, began drying up. And I pulled those threads slow and steady, so discreet that nothing tore right away. No dramatic collapse. Just a silent unraveling from the inside out, until only ruins remained. They thought they had exiled a pawn. What they never realized was that I had been the king all along. From the sidelines, I watched it begin. A delayed shipment. A transfer that didn't go through. Subtle, but enough to raise eyebrows. To get people asking questions. Investors. Vendors. Victor, so busy puffing up his legacy, wouldn't see the decay until it was in his lap. And Sabrina? Too consumed with her image, too obsessed with her filtered little life to notice the ground was crumbling under her. That motel, filthy and forgotten, became the headquarters for my resurrection. I didn't fall into despair. I rose from it. They'd stripped away everything. My home, my name, my marriage, my place in the world. But I wasn't erased. I didn't fade. Because ghosts don't vanish. They wait. And when the time came, when their world began to fracture, when the comfort they trusted gave way to collapse, they'd feel it. Like a cold hand brushing the back of their neck. Like breath in a locked room. They'd start to wonder, where did things start going wrong? Why does it feel like the walls are closing in? And they'd never suspect it was me, the man they betrayed, sitting quietly in the shadows, watching it all disintegrate with a steady hand and a heart turned to ice. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the start of something bigger. I didn't blow up my life. Didn't cause a scene. No headlines. No stage meltdown. Nothing Sabrina could screenshot and share with her friends to validate the garbage she spewed about me. No, I didn't rage. I disappeared. Clean. Surgical. Quiet. Like the shadow that fades from a picture. No calls. No begging texts. No drunken posts. I didn't ask for pity. I didn't want it. I just vanished, completely unreachable. And most importantly, uncontrollable. While they basked in their imagined victory, I moved silently. Every minute they wasted celebrating was another minute I spent wrapping a noose around their empire. I knew Victor's patterns better than he did. I knew where he cut corners, where he took shortcuts and buried the dirt. All those shady deals he called just business? I knew the truth behind every one. I knew which suppliers kept him afloat when margins got tight, which partnerships were based on fragile lies. And now that I was gone, the one who used to patch those cracks, those same fractures were going to widen until they split the whole foundation apart. I tapped into a network I had built over the years, people who didn't follow me because they were scared or bought. No, they followed because I delivered. Because I treated them like people. They remembered me. The guy who got things done without applause. Who fixed what others broke? When I called, they answered. When I asked, they acted. A few quiet chats. A few digital nudges. And just like that, accounts tied to Helix's liquidity started freezing silently and methodically. The money that once flowed so easily began to choke. To outsiders, it probably looked like random setbacks, a missed invoice, a late shipment, a forgotten renewal. But I knew better. Every delay was part of the plan. Every disruption was a precise cut. And I wasn't even close to finished. I had laid the groundwork long ago. Patents, buried claims, licensing rights funneled through third-party shells, all technically mine, just disguised well enough for Victor to think he owned them. While he posed for press photos and clutched his trophies, I had been cementing a foundation beneath his feet, a foundation only I could pull. So I did. Piece by piece, I started reclaiming it. I yanked access to software licenses Helix Corp needed just to function. I killed off consulting services that fed them market insights they didn't even realize they depended on. Contracts vanished. Quiet lawsuits started brewing in the corners, tiny legal fires they wouldn't see until it was far too late to contain them. From my new hideout, a plain, forgettable apartment 2 cities away, the kind where neighbors keep to themselves, I sat back and watched the flames catch. I didn't need to lift a finger anymore. I'd built the machine. Now it ran on its own. They believed they had eliminated a piece from the board. But I had been running the board the whole time. And now that I no longer had to wear a mask, I moved freely. No more nods of approval from Victor. No more cold, half-hearted praise from Sabrina. I didn't need them. I had built my own empire. One they never even saw coming. Invisible. Focused. Relentless. And best of all, it only took a few quiet moves to bring theirs to its knees. Because Victor, arrogant and blind, was easy to predict. He was always going to blame someone else. As the days stretched into weeks, the panic spread like wildfire. Suddenly, suppliers wanted cash up front, no more handshakes and long-standing promises. Investors pulled out of meetings, hiding behind fake scheduling conflicts. One of Helix Corp's biggest clients walked away without so much as a warning, a decision that was going to bleed millions from their next earnings report. I could only imagine Victor and Sabrina scrambling, desperately plugging leaks, putting on fake smiles, trying to convince the world everything was fine, that they still had control. But control? That's a fragile thing. Once it starts to crack, once a little doubt slips in, it infects everything. And no amount of money or charm can fix it. I wasn't just tearing down their company, I was burning down the myth of their power, peeling away the illusion to show what they really were. Fakes. Built on stolen work and bloated egos. Too proud to notice the hand feeding them until it pulled away. And I just watched. Waited. Smiled. Because the panic had only just begun. The breaking point came on a brittle gray morning, the kind where even the sun didn't want to show its face. It was board meeting day, the emergency session Victor had called, probably hoping to calm the chaos, to convince investors the ship wasn't sinking. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. My presence would have been too loud, too obvious. Instead, I sent someone better, a proxy. A quiet professional in a sleek suit, the kind of guy no one notices until it's too late. He walked into the boardroom with a manila folder under his arm. He didn't look familiar. He didn't belong to any firm on their radar. Maybe they thought he was an auditor, maybe compliance, easy to ignore. Until he laid those folders down in front of each board member and said, calmly, I suggest you read carefully before today's vote. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. Inside those folders was everything. Proof of the dirty deals, the cooked books, the creative accounting that Victor had been using to keep up the illusion of endless success. Forged signatures. Faked contracts. Massive debt swept under pristine carpets. I had collected it all, little by little, over the years. Stored it quietly, untouched, waiting for the right moment to let it breathe. And then there were the messages. Texts and emails between Victor and Sabrina, every slimy plan laid bare. How they mocked me. How they laughed about keeping me in the dark. How Sabrina bragged about playing me like a puppet, right up to the moment she cut the strings. That smug gloating, the rehearsed betrayal, every word printed in black and white. But what sealed it? The contracts. Real, notarized, airtight. Showing that the core pieces of infrastructure, the patents, the consulting services, the legal keys to their operations never belonged to Helix Corp at all. They were mine. Had been mine for years. Just buried deep beneath layers they never thought to examine. It took less than an hour for the room to implode. Less than an hour for the very people who once applauded Victor to realize the Emperor wasn't wearing anything but lies. I can only imagine the silence. The shifting glances. The moment when the board stopped seeing a mogul and started seeing a scared, cornered old man choking on his own spin. Some reports said he turned pale, that his hands trembled while he tried to explain, to dress up the disaster like it was just a misunderstanding. But there are some truths you can't pretty up. You can't twist them into something safe. Cold facts don't need help. They speak for themselves. And outside? The world moved fast. News traveled quicker than lightning. Investor forums lit up. Emails started flying. Financial blogs. News tickers. Everywhere. Helix Corp stock, once as solid as concrete, started dropping by the hour. Suppliers jumped ship, not wanting to get dragged down. Clients demanded audits, renegotiations. And the competition? They circled like vultures, smelling blood in the water. Meanwhile, I sat in a corner booth at some dingy coffee shop miles away, sipping lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt toast, watching it all unfold across the screen of my laptop. The emails, the updates, the chaos. Then my phone buzzed. Call number 194. Sabrina. Her name flashed across the screen like some twisted joke. I stared at it, just letting it ring. Part of me, some small, bruised corner I didn't like to admit existed, wanted to answer. Not because I missed her. God, no. But because I wanted to hear it, the panic, the fear, the realization that her perfect little plan had turned to dust. But I didn't answer. I let it ring out. Let her voicemail vanish into digital silence. She didn't deserve to hear mine. Not anymore. I finished the last sip of that bitter coffee, slid the cup aside, and stood up. The clouds had finally broken, a weak streak of sunlight slipping through. I had places to be, plans still in motion. And I wasn't about to waste another second on the people who threw me out the second I stopped being useful. They played their part. Their fall was well underway. Now it was my turn to finish building something better. As I stepped outside, into the crisp bite of winter air, I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel victory, not the way people think it feels. No yelling, no triumphant fist in the air, no screaming that I'd won. What I felt was stillness. A cold, clean kind of satisfaction that settled deep into my bones. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it comes in silence, like a slow collapse that no one sees coming until they're already buried in it. And I had time. All the time in the world to watch. Betrayal, I've learned, doesn't age well. It spoils fast. It decays from the inside out, way faster than the betrayer ever expects. Sabrina had built her entire life around smoke and mirrors. Curated Instagram smiles. Designer gowns and charity galas. Magazine quotes calling her a rising socialite. Every photo planned. Every smile rehearsed. Every word fed to an audience that only existed to envy her. But when the truth started leaking not in a flood, but a slow drip through cracked stone, her illusion cracked too. And the world turned away. First it was the little things. Designers suddenly didn't have a dress for her. Friends who used to spam her comments with hearts vanished. Invitations dried up. Brands ghosted her, citing vague PR realignments. No one reached out. Not the assistants. Not the PR team. Not the friends who once begged to sit next to her at galas. And then the screenshots hit. Old messages, smug, cruel things she thought would never see the light of day. Her mocking text about me. Her twisted boasts about how easily she'd manipulated me. They started showing up online. First on forums. Then gossip blogs. Then the real news. Whatever sympathy she had tried to spin was gone in a blink. She wasn't a survivor anymore. She was a manipulator. A fraud. And me? I didn't have to do a thing. I just watched. Calm. Detached. From a new apartment in a new city, already 3 steps ahead, while she flailed in a spotlight that no longer adored her. As days blurred into weeks, the fear spread faster than I ever could have planned. Suppliers no longer trusted handshakes or history. They wanted cash up front. Investors began ducking out of scheduled meetings with vague excuses. And then it happened. A major client pulled the plug without a word, walking away from a contract worth millions. That one hit would leave a crater in Helix Corp's quarterly report. I didn't have to be there to picture it. Victor and Sabrina racing to contain the fallout, putting out fires they didn't see coming, clinging to the illusion that they were still in charge. But control? It's a paper-thin fantasy. Once a single crack shows, the whole thing starts to split. Doubt spreads like disease, slow at first, then all at once. And no amount of charisma, no pile of money, no spin team on earth can patch it. I wasn't just toppling their empire. I was tearing down the image they'd built around it. The untouchable duo. The golden power couple. What a joke. They weren't giants. They were just thieves standing on a pile of stolen credit, too blind to see that the very hand that fed them was now pulling away. So I waited, patient, smiling, because the collapse had only just begun. It all came to a head on a cold, brittle morning, the kind where even the sunrise feels reluctant. That was the day of the emergency board meeting, Victor's last-ditch effort to calm the storm, to fix the widening cracks with glossy words and a nervous smile. I didn't show up. Of course I didn't. That would have been too loud, too obvious. Instead, I sent someone else, someone better. A quiet professional in a sharp suit. The kind of guy who doesn't raise his voice, because he never has to. He walked into that boardroom with a manila folder under his arm, not a single flash of drama. No one recognized him. He wasn't one of the usual faces. Didn't belong to any known firm. Probably looked like an auditor. Or some compliance drone. Someone easily ignored. Until he laid a folder in front of each board member. Until he spoke 8 simple words. I suggest you read carefully before today's vote. The mood in the room shifted instantly. Inside those folders, everything. The proof, the lies, the numbers, the fraud. Pages of doctored reports, forged contracts, backdated files. All the creative accounting Victor had used to prop up the illusion of unstoppable growth. And debt, hidden debts, the kind that could swallow a company whole. I'd spent years collecting it. Every piece, every message, every quiet little whisper they thought no one would catch. All stashed away and untouched until the time was right. And there they were, too. Copies of text messages and emails between Victor and Sabrina. Candid. Cold. Damning. I read their words 1,000 times. How they ridiculed my loyalty. How Sabrina bragged about leading me along, pretending to love me while plotting my fall behind closed doors. Like I was some blind, loyal pet they couldn't wait to put down. But what hit hardest, what landed the knockout punch, were the contracts. Real. Notarized. Legally airtight. Proof that the patents, the consulting channels, the infrastructure that Helix Corp ran on weren't theirs. They were mine. Had been mine for years. Hidden behind enough layers and silence that they never thought to check. It took less than 60 minutes for everything to implode. For that boardroom full of polished smiles and practiced nods to turn ice cold. I could imagine the silence. The sideways glances. The dawning realization that the man they'd once called a visionary was nothing but a fraud grasping at the shreds of his collapsing throne. Later reports said Victor turned white, his hands shaking as he tried to spin it all, to downplay the damage, twist the narrative, salvage his pride. But there's a certain kind of truth you can't polish. Cold facts don't need makeup. They don't need a speech. They just do their job. And outside those walls, the ripple hit like a tidal wave. Word spread fast. Faster than I even expected. Investors, journalists, analysts. One by one, they caught scent of the blood in the water. Helix Corp's stock, once rock solid, started hemorrhaging value by the hour. Suppliers backed out. Clients called emergency audits. Contracts were frozen. Lawsuits began forming like clouds before a storm. And me? I sat at a cheap coffee shop 100 miles away, sipping something that tasted more like ash than caffeine, watching the whole thing unfold on a flickering screen and a buzzing phone. That phone didn't stop. Message after message. Alert after alert. Then came call number 194. Sabrina. Her name lit up the screen like a bad memory. I stared at it, just stared, as it vibrated in my hand. Some bitter, raw instinct wanted to answer. Not because I missed her. Not because I needed closure. But maybe because I wanted to hear it in her voice. The panic. The fear. The sound of someone finally realizing they weren't the one holding the leash. But I didn't pick up. I let it ring. Let it die in the void. She didn't deserve to be heard. Not anymore. Instead, I drained the last of my coffee, tossed the cup in the trash, and stepped outside just as the sun started to poke weakly through the clouds. I had places to be. Plans to keep moving. I wasn't about to waste one more second on people who threw me aside the moment I wasn't useful anymore. They had their role to play, and they'd played it perfectly. Their downfall was already in motion. Now it was time to finish what I started. As I stepped into the pale winter light, I felt nothing dramatic. No gloating. No wild celebration. None of the movie-style triumph people imagine. There was no fist in the air. No shouting, I won. There was just a quiet calm, a cold, steady satisfaction that sank deep into my bones. Justice doesn't always show up with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like frost, slow, silent, unstoppable. And I had a front row seat to watch it all fall apart. Because betrayal, when exposed, rots quickly. Even faster when it's dragged into the light. Sabrina built her whole life around illusions. Flawless Instagram posts, posed charity photos, carefully edited magazine spreads. The rising star of the social scene. Every smile curated. Every word rehearsed for maximum envy. But now the cracks were showing. And the audience she lived for? They started turning away. It started small, like it always does. Designers no longer had time to dress her. PR agencies stopped returning calls. Friends who once flooded her DMs went radio silent. Invitations stopped. Brand deals dropped her in the middle of the night due to internal policy changes. No one offered a hand. Not one of those polished besties. Not one of those clapping assistants. Not one of the smiling PR vultures. And then the screenshots hit the press. Her messages. Her words. Cruel, mocking things, laughing at the people she once claimed to love, boasting about how she manipulated me like it was a sport. The public turned cold. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a user, a liar, a social climber exposed. And I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. From another city, already 3 moves ahead, I watched her world shrink while mine finally began to grow. When I finally played the voicemail back, it was short. No fury, no accusations. Just a voice, low, frayed, weighed down with something that sounded a lot like defeat. Please, let's talk. That was it. No apology. No admittance. Just a hollow whisper from a man who had finally realized that power, once lost, doesn't return just because you ask for it nicely. I didn't answer. Some messages deserve silence more than they deserve vengeance. Victor Harlan's fall didn't need my hand anymore. It was complete. Unstoppable. What could I possibly add to it? I pictured him alone in that sprawling, echoing mansion Sabrina used to parade all over Instagram. Cold chandelier light reflecting off marble floors, every room stripped of purpose. Wine cellars untouched. Closets filled with suits he no longer had a reason to wear. I imagined him sitting at that massive oak desk, the same one he used to lecture me across. Only now it was piled with final notices, subpoenas, collections. Not glowing reports or strategy binders. I didn't need to say anything. My silence spoke louder than any mic drop could. Victor spent his life stacking walls so high he couldn't see the people he crushed underneath them. And now? He was locked inside those same walls, staring down the wreckage, abandoned by the very empire he thought would carry his name forever. He'd made one critical mistake. He didn't just misjudge the market. He didn't just misread his board. He misjudged me. He thought being quiet meant being weak. He thought loyalty was naivety. He confused patience with powerlessness. He trained his whole life to face men who charged at him with swords drawn. But he never trained for the one who knelt, waited, smiled, and dismantled the battlefield beneath him piece by piece. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise a glass. Real victories don't taste like champagne. They taste like rain-cleansed air. Electric. Crisp. Charged with freedom. They feel like breathing for the first time in years. I slipped my phone into my coat, walked out of the cafe where I heard that voicemail, and let the drizzle wash over me. The city stretched before me like a living thing, wide open, buzzing with opportunity, fresh deals to strike, futures to write. And somewhere, back in the ruins of Helix Corp, Victor Harlan stared into the ashes of a kingdom that had never really been his. He thought I was a pawn. I had always been the architect. I had always been the storm. Under my real name, Lucas Merrick, I stepped out of the grave they tried to bury me in and into the world I had always been meant to build. No more hiding behind shell companies. No more ducking into the shadows. No more false humility. That was the day I unveiled Nova Aegis. To the public, it was a consulting firm. But I knew better. It wasn't built to play within the old rules. It was designed to outthink the system, outmaneuver it, and when necessary, obliterate it. At the press launch, I stepped up to the podium with calm, quiet confidence. Cameras flashed like lightning strikes. Behind me, a massive digital screen lit up with the new logo, a sharp, clean V piercing a rising sun. Symbolism? Sure. Maybe even poetic. But Nova wasn't poetry. It was a weapon, and I had forged every edge of it. The headlines hit like a drumbeat. Phantom genius reshapes industry. Power broker emerges with Nova Aegis. Unknown visionary commands tech world's attention. I didn't correct a thing. No interviews. No origin stories. I let the mystery build itself. People are addicted to legends, especially the ones they get to write themselves. And I fed that fire carefully, deliberately, with just enough oxygen to let it burn. The first wave of contracts came quickly. Tech firms, real estate syndicates, private equity players. They brought me their chaos, their high-stakes ambitions, the tangled messes they were too afraid to untangle alone. I gave them what Helix Corp never could: clarity, precision, power. Where Victor bloated himself with ego, I trimmed every fat inch from my process. Every decision, every alliance, every move was intentional, surgical. I wasn't trying to be everything to everyone. I built something for those who understood value, who played for legacy, not flash. And then came the defectors. Quiet at first. Emails sent late at night. Murmurs in private clubs, whispered in gallery back rooms and retreat lounges. The clients Victor once treated like trophies began to realize the truth, that the wins they celebrated had never come from Helix Corp. They came from me. And they wanted back in. Not just for results. For revolution. One by one, they crossed over. With every signature, a piece of Helix Corp's foundation collapsed. Nova didn't just grow. It erased what tried to bury me. And the city? It changed around me. That skyline I used to admire from a borrowed desk? It began to evolve. Towers rose. Infrastructure reshaped. Data centers. Luxury builds. Projects no one even realized were Nova-backed. But I knew. My fingerprints were everywhere. Silent. Unmistakable. I'd walk through the financial district now, past skyscrapers gleaming in morning sun, and smile to myself. Not because they saw buildings, but because I saw battlefields. And I had already won them. I didn't just climb the mountain. I rebuilt it. In my name. There was no need to shout my success. No need to rub it in anyone's face. Not Victor's. Not Sabrina's. Their worlds had already shrunk to the size of a prison cell made of ego and regret. They couldn't reach me now, even if they screamed my name into the sky. Still, sometimes, whispers found their way to me. Sabrina's sad attempt at a lifestyle brand. A limp little launch that collapsed before it could stand. Victor's lawsuits, tossed from court like trash, each one a pathetic attempt to claw back something that had never truly belonged to him. None of it mattered. Their downfall wasn't caused by a mistake. It happened the day they tried to bury a man who had already outgrown his grave. I live differently now. No gold-plated nonsense. No Instagram-ready displays of wealth. Just a penthouse I helped design, cut from steel and glass, high above the city that once swallowed me whole. Floor-to-ceiling windows bring in sunlight by day and stars by night. And when I look out, I don't see buildings. I see the life I built. With no leash, no debt, no apology. This wasn't about showing off. It was about breathing, living, owning my freedom completely. And in the quiet hours, when the city hums like a heartbeat below, I'll sit out on the terrace and think about the journey. Not with bitterness, not even with regret. Just awe. Because every fall, every betrayal, every sleepless night in a freezing car, every slammed door, every stifled scream, they were all necessary. Every wound had purpose. Every scar told the story of the man I had become. Every trial, every betrayal, they hadn't broken me. They had forged me. They weren't obstacles. They were architects. And in their own twisted way, they helped build the man I had become. Lucas Merrick wasn't some casualty of Helix Corporation. He was its quiet executioner. The one who rewrote the ending from the shadows. And Nova Aegis? That was just the starting line. The world didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. They learned soon enough. 6 months to the day, almost to the hour, she found me. It was one of those crisp afternoons that carried the scent of autumn and quiet ambition. I was seated outside a cafe, nestled against the edge of a lively plaza. Just me, a black coffee, and a tablet filled with project notes. Focused, steady, moving forward. Then, out of the corner of my eye, movement. I glanced up, and there she was, Sabrina. She lingered near the entrance, her fingers clenched tight around a designer handbag, scanning the tables, searching, until her eyes found mine. She walked toward me, not with the effortless grace she used to float through rooms, but with hesitation, uncertainty. Her steps faltered. Her heels clicked unevenly on the pavement. The brand tags on her clothes were still expensive, but the sheen was gone. The presence, the poise, faded. Her hair was done, but not perfect. Her armor had cracked, and the woman standing in front of me looked smaller, fragile, scared. She stopped at my table, swallowing hard. Her voice was thin, barely holding together. "Lucas," she said, "please, can we talk?" I didn't move. Just set the tablet down gently. Let the silence stretch. A few people nearby turned their heads, feeling it. The weight of two people standing on opposite ends of a war that had already been lost. I didn't say a word, just motioned toward the empty chair across from me. If she wanted to sit in the aftermath she created, she was welcome to. She eased into the seat, clutching her bag like a shield. For a long moment, she just looked at me, really looked. Like she was trying to recognize the man she once knew. The one she'd molded, used, thrown away. But that man, he didn't exist anymore. What sat across from her now wasn't hers to grieve or reclaim. And I think she knew it. Her eyes welled up almost instantly. "I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought I was doing what was right for me. I didn't realize how much I—" She trailed off, tried to wipe her tears with trembling hands. Searching for something, words, pity, time. "I miss you," she finally said, fragile as glass. "We were good together. We could be again. Please, Lucas. I've changed." The smell of her perfume floated between us. Familiar. Too familiar. It was the same scent she wore the night we first met at that Helix Corp gala. Back when everything still shimmered with possibility. When I didn't know better. She was reaching into memory, trying to pull me back into a world that no longer existed. I set my coffee cup down gently, folded my hands, leaned forward, just enough. "You fell in love with a mask," I said softly, steadily. "A version of me you created. Someone you thought you could shape to fit whatever came next." She shook her head, lips parting to protest. I raised my hand. She stopped. "The man you're looking at now? You don't know him," I continued. "You never really tried. And the truth is, he doesn't know you either. Not anymore." Her face fell. Shoulders slumped in on themselves. The performance, the arguments, all of it faded. Because somewhere in that moment, she understood. There was no reset button. No magic word. What we had wasn't waiting beneath the surface, ready to be rescued. It was gone, burned away by every calculated betrayal. Every lie. Every time she chose ambition over truth. I stood, slow and calm. Picked up my tablet. Slid on my jacket. She looked up at me, blinking as though she couldn't believe I was walking away. Like the right sentence might still fall from the sky and pull me back. But life doesn't work that way. Not for people like her. Not anymore. I tucked the chair under the table, nodded once, polite, final, and left. Behind me, she sat in a sea of strangers who didn't care who she used to be. No one asked why the beautiful woman at the corner table was crying into a silk scarf. And I didn't look back. The city moved around me, indifferent, alive. And I felt nothing but freedom. Every word that needed to be said had already been spoken, through the life I'd built without her. She was reaching for a version of me that no longer existed. And I was walking into a future that finally, fully, belonged to me. I live quietly now. Not in hiding. Just apart. There's a difference. I don't chase the spotlight the way Victor did. That artificial heat scorched him alive. I don't need applause or press or title chases. Because real power? It doesn't shout. It hums, low and steady, beneath everything. It moves like current beneath ice, silent and inescapable. Every contract I sign, every skyscraper that rises on land I once walked in silence, every boardroom pivot that bears my fingerprints, it all carries the weight of who I am now. Nova Aegis is more than a company. It's a force, a name that weaves through industries and borders. It bends policy, rewrites futures, moves billions with a whisper. I don't need statues. I don't need my name carved into steel. My legacy lives in the way the world tilts slightly around the things I touch. Sometimes, I see traces of it. A name buried in an article about our latest acquisition, a tower shaped by blueprints I once sketched in the dark, a sudden shift in a company that once seemed too big to change. Not revenge. Resurrection. Proof that no betrayal, not exile, not heartbreak, could destroy what had always lived inside me. The man they discarded? The one they shoved out without a second thought? That man became their reckoning without ever raising his voice. Sometimes I wonder if they see it. If Sabrina, alone in a smaller, dimmer apartment than she ever imagined, feels that flicker of familiarity when my name drifts past her screen. If Victor, pacing through that echoing mansion, still lies to himself, pretending it was bad timing or market turns, not his own pride, that brought it all down. And I hope they do. not out of cruelty, but because there's something poetic about being haunted not by rage, but by the shadow of what you lost. I don't follow their stories. I don't need to. Their defeat was written the moment they chose betrayal over loyalty, arrogance over wisdom. My legacy isn't their ruin. It's the empires I'm building now, the lives I change, the futures I shape. I live simply, in a way few would understand. My penthouse is elegant, not extravagant. My suits are tailored, not flashy. My days are full, not with conquest, but creation. Because true power doesn't scream. It whispers. It waits. It rewrites the world slowly, unseen by those too obsessed with their own reflection to feel it shifting beneath them. At the heart of my home is a quiet study. Walls lined with darkwood, shelves filled with old books, not trophies. Not gold. Just the weight of wisdom earned over time. At night, I sit there, and I think about the road that brought me here. Not with anger, not with regret, with awe. If I had known how much it would cost, would I have loved her anyway? Would I have trusted him? Maybe. Maybe becoming stronger isn't about forgetting who you were, but carrying it with you, scar and all. A reminder of what hurt once, but doesn't anymore. I'm not the man they tried to break. I'm the man who rose from the ashes they left behind. And in that, there is peace. A peace they'll never know. Sometimes I get letters, invitations, enticements to step back into the games I used to play, gala invites, exclusive boards, flashy foundations. I decline, most of the time. Kindly, cleanly. Let others chase the spotlight. I'd rather move the world from the shadows. Because that's my legacy, not loud, not obvious, but permanent. Unstoppable. And somewhere out there, late at night, when the city is quiet and the skyline flickers like stars, I know Sabrina and Victor still feel it. The presence they thought would disappear. But shadows don't vanish. They linger. They stretch. And if you're not careful, they become the foundation for everything that comes next. I lean back in my chair, the pulse of the city whispering through the glass, and I smile. Not in triumph. In understanding. Because the legacy I leave? It's not in headlines or marble. It's in the bones of the world they once thought they ruled. And it will outlast every name they ever tried to protect.